One of the main questions I often get asked by international clients is, Rob, what is Australian culture? What are the expectations? And will I fit in? When going to a new country, this can be a concern because as humans, we want to be able to do the right thing and not offend anybody. So in today's video, I'm going to give you an overview of 8 areas that you need to be aware of from an Australian perspective when it comes to Australian culture, as this will help you to understand Australians better, know what the Australian cultural expectations are, avoid offending or upsetting anybody, and most importantly, understand how to fit in as a foreigner into Australian culture. So how is Australian culture defined? According to Wikipedia, the culture of Australia is primarily a Western culture, originally derived from Britain, but also influenced by the unique geography of Australia and the cultural input of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islanders, and other Australian people. The British colonisation of Australia began in 1788, and waves of multi-ethnic migration followed. Evidence of a significant Anglo-Celtic heritage includes the predominance of the English language, the existence of a democratic system of government drawing upon the British traditions of Westminster government, parliamentarism and constitutional monarchy, American constitutionalists and federal traditions, and Christianity as the dominant religion. If you wanted to get the full background of what Australian culture is about, I've put the link in the description below that you can have a look at later. But how do we explain that passage in simple terms? Australia is built on diversity, and here are 8 areas that I think that you should be aware of in order for you to be able to fit into the Australian culture. Number 1, friendliness. Australians are friendly by nature and enjoy helping others. Australia values people who are authentic and are themselves rather than trying to be somebody else. Because Australians are friendly, Australians prefer if you ask them for help rather than struggling. They do not see it as weakness when somebody needs help. Generally, in Australia, we won't complain in public as we see this as rudeness. And Australians prefer not to make a scene in public. And as part of their friendliness in Australia, Australians prefer that people use their manners, such as please and thank yous and things like that, as we like to be very polite. And you'll find that people always acknowledge each other, whether it's through a head nod or a wave or something like that, as Australians like to be acknowledged and feel like they've been heard and the message has been received. Number 2, sense of humour. Aussies have a dry, sarcastic sense of humour and are not only happy to make fun of their friends, but of themselves. We like to say we like to take the mickey out of ourselves or take the pun out of ourselves as slang. So it's not uncommon when you go to a local event where an Australian is providing a story and talking about themselves in a negative way, but in a humorous way. This just demonstrates that we are all human and nobody is perfect. Number 3, Australians love fairness and love the underdog, or going against the odds. This persona has come from the military days when Australia has been in many conflicts, and also because it's such a small nation of diversity, going against the odds from bigger countries when competing on the world stage in sports. Because Australia believes in fairness, for many, many years over its history, it has engaged with taking on migrants from all over the world, especially from countries where there have been a lot of conflicts, such as wars and things like that, and settled in Australia. Because of this process, Australia has become one of the leading worlds when it comes to diversity. From people from many countries, from religions, from food cultures, and so on. And that's what makes Australia unique. But one of the strange things that you'll encounter in Australia is that Aussie loves a good lineup. So what that means is they'll wait in the queue as a result of that fairness and be patient. So if there's a queue to go to a restaurant or a queue to go to an event and things like that, you'll find that Aussies prefer to be in an orderly fashion in any form of queue and hate queue jumpers, people that want to push in. It is considered very rude. When it comes to a work environment, Aussies like to pull their own weight and prefer that other people do that as well. What that means is that Aussies like to work hard and like to believe that other people around them will work just as hard as they will. As Australians believe strongly in teamwork and meeting deadlines. Aussies respect people who are hard workers with a can-do attitude. So having a crack, trying it out before you give up in the first place. Number 4, informality. Generally, Aussies are laid back and like to chill, but they do respect honesty and punctuality. In saying that, we don't like people just to drop in on us. Aussies are appointment orientated, as we appreciate and value other people's time. So, for example, if I wanted to go to visit a friend on the weekend, I would actually call them up first and say, hey, can I come over to your house on the weekend? Or is it a good time to catch up with you? Or is it a good time to call you right now? That's the way an Aussie works because of that respect. And if we say we are going to be somewhere at a certain time and date, we expect to be there on time. Aussies feel that being late is very disrespectful. So in order to overcome this, the best thing you can do here is to actually call or send a message to your friend or to where you're going for the appointment and just let them know how long you're going to be. If it's going to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, rather than not saying anything and turning up late. Now, before we move on to the next few points, if you're finding today's video useful, please click on the like button down below or subscribe to keep up to date with other videos that might pop in, or place a comment down below on how you're finding these particular points and if there's anything that you want to know more about. So let's continue. Number 5, socializing. Aussies love their food and generally during the warmer weather like to get together to have a barbecue. And during the cooler months like to catch up for dinner or go out for lunch. If you are attending a barbecue, generally an Aussie will ask you to bring a plate, something to nibble on. For example, you might bring a salad or a dessert or things like that. And if they provide on the invitation a BYO, that stands for bring your own. Generally, Aussies will not supply alcohol. You would generally bring your own booze. So if you get an invitation to attend a party or an event, generally an Aussie will add in there for you to register that you're going to come or not by a certain date. It's always a great idea to make sure that you let your host know if you are or are not going to attend the event, as Aussies find it disrespectful if you don't say anything at all, as this can offend them. Number 6, personal space. Aussies love their personal space, and before you get to know them, it's important that you provide that space around them, maybe at least one step back. So generally in a greeting, you would greet an Australian with a handshake. It's not generally considered acceptable to provide them a hug when you don't know the person or kiss them on the cheeks like you tend to do, for example, in Europe and places like that. So a simple handshake or hi, how you going? Or a nod, hello, how you going? Is a good way to initially get to learn or meet an Australian before you get to know them. After a few years, it's generally commonplace for females to maybe kiss and hug, but generally from a male to male point of view, it's always a handshake most of the time. And if you do invade an Australian's personal space, they tend to get mad, so please be mindful of that. Number 7, politics and religion. As Australians, we generally tend not to talk about politics or religion, as this can be seen as a divisive topic, meaning that it can cause conflict amongst people. Aussies do like small talk, and they'll talk about anything else, in particular around sports, TV shows, news events, their families, TV personalities, funny stories, and work. Generally, the only time politics is ever spoken about is during a general election. So, from the points that we have covered so far, have you had an aha moment that you were not aware of about the Australian culture and that you want to learn more about? If you do, leave your comments down below. Point number 8, the English language in Australia. Now, for those that have been following me for a little while on YouTube, you'll notice that my English is a bit more articulate than usual. But in this video, I have purposely used a lot of English slang. The English dialect in Australia is very different to British and to American dialect. And words can be similar but have different meanings. That's what sometimes makes English a trickier language to learn. In Australia, for example, we like to shorten our words. For example, arvo for afternoon or BYO for bring your own. Or meanings such as having a crack, which means having a go at something. Aussie or Australian slang is used in everyday life, including the work environment. So I encourage you to be vulnerable and never be afraid to ask questions when you're not sure on a particular word in English and what it means. Don't be afraid to ask questions or have a go. And speaking about English, in the next video, I'm going to provide you an overview of what the new changes are in reference to English and how they can impact you as an international student in the future.